Okay. Hi YouTube. You guys know that I play a lot of Apex when I stream, and I play other things as well other than just Apex. But I think today I'm going to talk about the things that I went through growing up because I don't think I've ever really spoken about it. I've never really told much people about the trauma and the abuse and the neglect that I had went through growing up. So I think this is probably the appropriate time to talk to you guys about the things that I had to go through, the stuff that I had to endure, and what all of that caused throughout my life, and my whole mindset now about it. So this isn't really something that I wanted to do, but something told me, you know what, I gotta do this. I gotta talk about it. I gotta talk about the things that I went through in my life and why I started YouTube and why I started Twitch and streaming and all that other stuff. So I figure I go ahead and talk about it and let you guys know why I do it now, why I am the kind of person that I am. No, don't get me wrong. I'm not a bad person. I'm really not. But I do have my ups and downs. I do have my days and all of that. But yeah, so let's start from number one. So I was born in Maryland. Um, I was born in, I think it's Shady Grove Hospital in Maryland. So Shady Grove or Silver Spring, Maryland. At most. I think that's where it's located in. But yeah, my whole life, I pretty much, not my whole life. Let's put it like this. Okay, so I was born in Maryland, September 27th. I'm not gonna say the year because I don't need people to really know my age as much as a lot of y'all do know already. But if you don't know, yeah. Walk all the way to the edge of this thing. Anyways, yeah. So born in Maryland, September 27th. I lived with my dad and my mom, I think. I'm not quite sure. Um, but I do know remembering living with them for a while. I remember taking a picture, and a lot of people they don't remember um, pictures or anything that happened when they were born or when they were younger, but I do. Sadly, I remember everything, which makes it, a lot more difficult to say that I'm okay or that I'll be fine. But anyways, I remember taking a picture with my family. It was like winter time, and I remember having this little jacket, uh, like this little fluffy, like pink jacket. It was very, very creepy, but I remember the picture so well, but I've never seen the picture myself. But I remember taking the picture. I remember going to Lake Forest Mall in Gaithersburg, which is where I grew up in my life with my dad. My mom did leave my life for a good long while, which led me to live with my dad. Um, then I moved in with my aunt and uncles in Florida, Tampa, Florida, which is to be exact. So I lived my life pretty much there, where I first went to school. Um, so that's when I started school, was in Florida, and I loved it there. But it was like probably the best moment of my life growing there. But I didn't have my mom or my dad in my life at that point in time, which kind of sucked because every kid deserves to have their parents in their life, but I didn't. So it kind of hurt to know that they weren't gonna be there. So, uh, grew up with my aunt and uncle, and then my two cousins, Andy and Robin, uh, my sister, my older sister Gloria, and my younger sister Julia. Now at this time, it was just the four of us until my dad finally came he came to live with us, um, which I was so happy to be able to see my dad after maybe what I think the first time I see my dad since I was a baby was like five, 5 or 6 years old. Um, so he came around and he brought my little brother Jose, which be mindful, never met him, didn't know he existed until he showed up, and that was like the best thing ever. He was already maybe like like maybe like a few years old. I don't know how old he was. But he was pretty young. We were all pretty young. So got to finally meet my brother, and not gonna lie, best ever. I loved my brother, and me and him were like twins. Um, we did everything together. Um, so that was a good life for us. Next, we stayed living in Florida, all of us. We used to go fishing, we used to go out to the beach all the time. It was pretty much the life that I wanted to live for the rest of my life. I've never really had any issues with that besides never seeing my mom. Now, at a young age, you shouldn't, if you don't see your parents for a very long time, you shouldn't know what they look like. But I had a vivid, memory of what my mom looked like and who she was. And I grew up pretty much not with my mom. I never really grew up with my mom. I never seen her, and all that. I remember Christmas, when I was younger, where she, I guess my aunt, we were sleeping in the living room under, like, right next to the Christmas tree. Not under it, but like next to it. And it was pretty cool to live in where we were, but during that night I remember sleeping, and I don't know what was going on in my dream, but I do remember like seeing like weird objects flying around, weird lights. Um, I've always had like this weird nightmare of like elephants for some reason. And I remember that dream so very, very much, and it scared the shit out of me. But it was a whole bunch of elephants running around, and in the middle of the room was like this little table, like kind of like a stand, I guess, with a needle in the middle. And I never understood what that was or why I kept having those dreams. This has nothing to do with my life, but it was in there and I had to remember it. I had to speak about it. But it was a constant dream. And I'm not scared of elephants. I love elephants to death, but that video scared the fuck out of me. And I don't know why, but it did. And um but yeah, I don't know what it was, but during having that dream, I've heard like screaming and yelling, all kinds of stuff, and I'm like the one person, like they're looking around like, oh my god, what is all this? Um, but back to the story with everything that happened. I was hearing screaming, so I woke up and I see my aunt, and she's like, go to your room. So I go to my room and I lay down and chill there, and I fall back to sleep. Next morning, I wake up and it's Christmas Day. And we're opening presents and we're having a nice time. And I got like this huge Barbie set, and it was like the best thing in the world. Like, it wasn't like a Barbie set, but like I used it as a Barbie set. Um, and all my Barbies had like terrible hair. Like, my Barbies never stayed good because I was always playing with them outside. I would dump in the mud and all that stuff. So I was like that kind of kid. But I would always go and play with like cars, trucks, and ride my bike and all that stuff. Um, and I remember seeing a present that was under the Christmas tree, and it was for me, and there was one for my sister, my brother, my other sister, and we always told ourselves, "It's like, why can't we open them?" My dad would never let us open them. He never let us touch them. He says this was a mistake to put these under here. These aren't for you guys, but we clearly saw our name. Um, so we didn't think anything of it, and we're just like, okay, whatever. Um, we weren't spoiled, so we didn't really care if there was a present under the tree that wasn't for us, but it was. So we were just like, yeah, whatever. Um, a few months later, I remember my dad talking to my aunt, and he was talking about moving. So we all ended up moving back to Maryland, and I remember moving back there, and we went to go live with my aunt and uncle. Um, and this place that we lived in, uh, that's where everything started going downhill for our life. Um, I love my aunt. I love my uncle. Let me rephrase. I never did like my aunt because my aunt, I felt like she didn't care about us. She didn't really like us. But that was always my thought in my life with her, where things with her were so bad. She treated us like we were slaves, like we weren't part of the family. It was a pretty shitty life to live, but that's the life that we lived until our dad decided to finally move out. And we finally got our own apartment back in Maryland, or back in Gaithersburg, Maryland. Let me put it at that. And I loved it there. I loved that place so much. I loved living there. My dad finally, he brought one of my uncles, and my uncle's was very creepy, like very, very creepy. Like he was a nice guy, but there was something off about him. And growing up, I just didn't like being around him. Um, After that, my uncle ended up leaving, and it was just back to me, my sisters, and my brother. I remember growing up seeing my sister. She was in like the emo phase, way before I was. So we were like maybe she was like in middle school and she was in this emo phase. She started cutting, and I never understood why she was cutting. But I told her, I'm like, why are you doing it? And like, why are you hurting yourself? And she said to me, she was like, well, it's my way of dealing with my own issues. I never understood what was going on. I never understood why she was doing it. I thought maybe she was just doing it because that's the kind of people that she was like circled herself around. And I never questioned her about it. I just told her, I was like, you know what, I'm always here for you. I remember my sister doing piercings. I remember my sister dyeing her hair, dyeing other people's hair. I remember seeing one of our so-called aunts, not really our aunt, but she was like family to us. I don't remember her name. I know it started with a C, but I remember looking at her and all I could think about is she looks just like my mom. It's scary. Not exactly like my mom, but she looked like like the kind of person that my mom would be. But I knew exactly what my mom looked like. I remember vividly what my mom looked like. I remember the tattoos that my mom had. And when I saw her, I asked her, I'm like, "Do you know my mom?" And she just told us about her. She told us how they were friends and all this and the other, but they stopped talking. And she never told me the exact story of what happened with her and my mom. So I never really asked her about it. I remember going to her house. She had like these, like, I think they're like Russian dolls where they would like be like a doll inside of a doll inside of a doll inside of a doll. And I remember growing up and I would play with it and I would just like take it apart and see the little tiny doll that was inside of it and then putting them all back together and then redoing it again. And it was just like a constant thing that I would do is just put them back together, take them apart, put them back together, take them apart. Um, but I remember doing that. But the house itself gave me like creepy vibes. So I would only stay in that one area and just play with the dolls. Um, I'm gonna go to a little ahead. My dad, me, my sisters, we would all go to church. We were very spiritual. Me and my dad were mainly. My sisters, not too much. It was just mainly me and my dad. And I was, daddy's little girl. Anything that my dad wanted me to do, I would do it. Uh, if my dad told me, you know what, you gotta believe in God, and that's what I did. And I did get highly, into God, and I was in that like state and where I wanted to make my dad proud, and that's what I did, and I did whatever he wanted, and I think that's the kind of person that I wanted to be, was just like my dad. Uh, I remember a night where I was I was sleeping, and I never told anyone this, and I always pride myself to saying that I had the best dad in the world, but I remember one night laying in bed and my dad comes, and I'm pretending to sleep, but it's like around morning time now. In the way, it's kind of like morning. And I remember my dad having like some lady and her son. I remember his name. His name was Miguel. Um, I remember him and his mom there. But I remember sleeping, or pretending to sleep. My dad crawled into the bed with me, and I felt something that a child should not feel. So I immediately got up and walked away. Now, I never had any issues with my dad in that moment. I didn't think anything of it, and I don't think anything of it now, but I knew that was kind of weird to having to feel that. So I got up, I went to go play my video games. I had a GameCube with a tiny little TV, and I remember sitting there and I played the game, and my friend, who was Miguel, he came and he started playing the game with us. And we got this GameCube from a person in our church, so we used to play it. I would play Tony Hawk, I would play Mortal Kombat, and Mortal Kombat was like my main game, which I would always play. Um, oop. So I would play that, and my dad, I remember him coming out of the room. He came over to me, took a blanket, and threw it at me. He's like, "Come back to bed." And I told him, I was like, "No." I was like, "I'm okay. I'm gonna just play my video games." And he didn't argue with me. He didn't complain. He just said, "Okay." So I I continued to play, and I don't know why I had this feeling of being scared, but at the same time, more or less, it's kind of like a I don't want to be near him right now. But I knew my dad meant no harm. I knew he was just trying to sleep with. Well, it's bad how I say it, but my dad was trying to sleep with me. But he was just trying to sleep in the bed because he slept in the living room. But he finally decided, here he's gonna sleep in the room with us. And so he did. Um, I remember one night my dad got us all up, and this is where everything went downhill in my life. I remember my dad coming to us and waking all of us up, and he told us we gotta go. And I was just so confused with what was going on. Come to find out that my sister had went to the hospital in the middle of the night. Police came and got her and took her to the hospital. And I didn't know what was going on. I remember my sister always going to her like friend's house and all that, or boyfriend's house, I guess. And that falls into the story. So, my sister ended up going to the hospital. My dad woke us all up, and we were like, he was pissed. I remember, first thing I grabbed was my DS and picked that up and was gonna take it with me, and I forgot it in the car once we got into the hospital. Uh, but I remember going in and, well, not going in, but we were walking out, and I see my mom, and I tell my dad, I'm like, "Dad, that's my mom. That's my mom." And I told him like, "Dad, she's a good lady now. She's a good lady." Never knowing that I was gonna regret my what I said about my mom. I remember sitting with my mom and talking to her and telling her how much I wanted to always meet her and be there, and how I told her how my life, every Mother's Day, my church would have like this little thing for the moms or the kids to get like a present and all that to my mom and all this, or to our moms. And me and my sisters, we would always feel left out because we were like, we don't have mom or dad, so we would always keep a little item that they gave us. And I remember, like, we just kind of like just sat there and we were just like, yeah, you know what, that's fine, we have our dad, so we would give our presents to our dad and be like, well, you're the mom and dad of our life. But I remember telling her that, and then they pulled her back there, and I remember seeing my dad, and my dad's sitting there, like, hands on his head. He's so confused. He's like pissed off at the same time because he doesn't know what was going on.
Hey,
Hello. So we continued with what was going on, and my mom pulled me in there with my sister. And my mom asked me, she's like, "Has your dad ever touched you inappropriately? Ever touched you in a way where he shouldn't touch you?" And I remember telling her, I was like, "No," and I never had that issue. No. Um, so we left it at that. And she finally told us that we were going to go with her, and I was so excited. I never knew why we were going with her, but I just said, okay. I was like, but remember, I got school tomorrow. So we went to go stay with my mom, and it it was good at first until I met my uncle or step uncle and my little brother and my little sister, and I never knew I had other siblings. They were a lot younger than me. I found out that my mom had three other kids after having the four kids that we have now, which is my older sister, me, my youngest sister, and my little brother. Then I found out that I had two other sisters and another little brother. Um, but I remember my uncle, my step uncle. He was very, very creepy. I remember uh, going in the living room and sitting down watching TV. And he stayed in the living room. He had like a little fold-up couch that we would, chill. But he told me to come over to him. And I was like, okay. So I went over to him. They didn't think anything of it. I'm like a very careless kid. So walk over to him. I'm like, his family, whatever. Not gonna hurt me. Not gonna do anything to me. So he's like, how old are you? And I remember telling him, I was like, well, I'm 10 or 11 years old at the time, so I tell him. And he's just like, no, you're not. He's like, you're 18. And I'm like, no, I'm definitely younger than that. Definitely don't look like I'm 18. And I was just like, okay, whatever. Um, I remember he would try to touch me, my chest, and I just tell him, I'm like, you know what, like, you're not gonna do that. And I told my mom, and she said she was gonna have a talk with him, tell him to stop. And I said, okay. I remember going to school, um, and I remember not being like that popular kid in school. I was always like that kid that kind of stayed to myself. I was the new girl. I remember like I think maybe like a month or so being in the school. I remember this guy. His name was Kevin. Uh, he's me and him started dating on our like field trip to DC, and I remember sitting on like the water fountain. He came over to me. He's like, "Do you want to be my girlfriend?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Why not?" And I was so nervous because it was like first ever, not really my first ever boyfriend, because I had boyfriends in like elementary school too, back home or back in Maryland or Gaithersburg. So I did like two other guys back then. Broke up with one because he ended up moving, and the other one he just tried to give me a kiss, and he had like chocolate all over his face. So I was kind of like, nah. So I remember those, but Kevin was like a really tall guy, like I don't know, like a greenish eyes. Um, but he was super sweet. He was a very nice guy. Um, we barely even hung out because how my mom was. She never really let us be outside, but we would always go outside either way. Um, but I remember we were all outside playing on the monkey bars and all that, joking around and whatnot. And come to find out, uh, well, not to come to find out, I was trying to play on the monkey bars. Boyfriend was there at the time. I remember slipping and falling, and like I think I broke like a few ribs, and then I broke my hand. And I lay there for a minute. My boyfriend was there. He wasn't really doing much. So I remember getting up and moving over to the bench because I was so dizzy. I was like, oh God, I gotta sit down. So I sit down, and there was like these two little twin girls, and they were so cute. They were like the cutest little kids ever. What the fuck is that? What? Hello? Is that this?
Phasing.
What? Oh yeah, I'm not Valk. There's like booms over here. Hold on. But I remember it like it's like it was yesterday. But I remember breaking my arm. Went back in. My step uncle or stepdad. At the time, I remember him trying to fix my hand and ended up breaking it even more. um, but it was pretty bad. I keep hearing walking behind me. It's scary. Um, but I remember when that happened. I was kind of like bedridden, and I had like few like after my hand got better, my boyfriend at the time broke up with me. He told me, oh, it was just a joke. We like had a bet, and that's why we dated you. And I was just like, okay. I didn't care. I was just like, you know what, whatever. We barely even talk, so I could care less. So I stopped talking to him. I remember I remember I remember laying in bed one day and we moved to a different house. But I was in and out of foster care. I remember foster homes where I had my first ever foster home. And first time I've ever had an issue with having to um, deal with it. Um, I remember my foster mom would like come into my room and she would tell me, "Hey, go to bed." It was maybe around like 4 o'clock. I would lay there and she would like she would tell me, "Go to bed. You gotta go to bed." And I told her I was like, "Well, I'm doing my homework." I had really really long hair at the time. Um, but she told me she was like, "No, you gotta go to bed now." And I told her I was like, "Well, I'm gotta do my homework." I remember her pulling my hair, like dragging me to my bed. I grabbed the textbook, hit her with the textbook, and I remember running down the stairs and I told her I'm gonna leave. I don't want to be here anymore.
This
And
sounds emotional.
it is. It's a very emotional thing. But I remember telling her I was like, I want to leave. I don't want to be here anymore. So I left. I tried to leave. Her so-called like stepdaughter or adopted daughter. She came to the door and she put her foot to the door and she's like, "You're not leaving. And if you try to open this door and hurt me, I'm gonna." She's like, "I'm gonna beat the shit out of you." At this time, I was maybe like 11 or 12 years old, and I remember telling her, "I don't give a fuck." I tried to open the door, hit her foot. She tried to like raise her hand towards me. So I forgot what I picked up. I think it was like the table or something. I grabbed something and I threw it at her, and I ran out the door. They ended up calling the police on me, and the police took me back. And I remember laying in the bed, and then I remember social service coming to pick me up and then taking me to a new foster home. At this time, I wasn't with my siblings. We were all separated, and it tore me to pieces because I never wanted to be away from my family. I never wanted to be away from my siblings. I never wanted to, live that life of not being with family. And I always told them I was like, I want to be with my mom and dad. I want to be with my family. I don't want to be here anymore. And they told me, well, you have to. So I remember going to my second foster home. And at this point, that foster home was pretty shitty. Um, I remember they would lock me up in my room and tell me this is where you're gonna stay, and I would stay in my
Emoji
room.
crying loudly.
I never like I had to stay in my room. They locked me in there. The only time I came out was if I had to go to school. Other than that, using the bathroom, they would give me a bucket to pee and poop in. I remember that. I remember I wasn't able to go anywhere. I remember there was like a little shop in the apartment building that we were in, and I would go downstairs and I would have like a little bit of money in my hand, and I would go ahead and buy stuff in the little store. And the guy, he would always seem so nice, and he was a very nice guy. Then finally, that day came where I finally was able to go back and live with my mom after our court hearing. And so my mom took me in. They could let me stay with my mom after I told them the abuse that I was going through, which I pretty much was like a caged animal. Um, and that's where my PTSD and anxiety and depression started coming into play. I remember my mom ended up moving home, and um, there was one day where I was in the living room. I was watching cartoons. I think I was watching Adventure Time at the time. So I think I was maybe like 13, 14 years old when I started watching that. And I remember, you know, playing and or watching videos and watching Cartoon Network, and my uncle, my step uncle, the same one from the beginning of the story, who was like, "Oh, you're not, you're not 10 or 11 years old. You're like 18, whatever. I remember he came. I didn't know he was living with us. I remember him like coming over and he was just like, "Hey, let's play." And I'm like, "No," and I knew what he was talking about. He tried touching me and he grabbed me with his like his hand and I grabbed his thumb and I remember putting his thumb in my mouth and then biting the hell out of it. I broke skin and I broke to the bone. Um, and he finally let go of me. I got up, I turned off the TV, and I went into my room. In my room, I had two dogs. I had a pit bull. His name was Zipper, and then I had I forgot what kind of dog she was, but I had her, and her name was Sheila or Sherry. Yeah, Sheila, because I remember for me, Sheila kind of reminded me of Shakira. So, um, sorry, I ended up one day just like sleeping and like maybe a few days go by and I remember sleeping in my bed and my bed was on the floor and I had my dog with me. I remember my dog got up and started like growling and barking. I wake up and I see my step uncle in my room and he's like shh shh shh. He's like, do stuff with me and I'll pay you. And I remember crying and getting so pissed off with him and I was so happy that my dogs were there. So he left out of the room. In the morning came and I went over to my mom and I told her what happened and she's like, "Well, you should have just took the money. You should have let him do what he had to do and took the money." And I literally sat there and I was just like, "Are you fucking joking? Like, are you actually fucking serious? Like, what kind of mother would let that shit happen?" And I told her I was like, either he needs to leave or I'm leaving. And she was like, I'll talk to him about it. Da da da." And then after that, finally, they told him that he had to leave, that he wasn't allowed to stay there anymore. And I remember the day that he left was the same day my mom told me, or called social service and told them that she couldn't handle me anymore, and that I was a problem child, and yada yada yada. So I remember, come on, climb. I remember social service coming, and I didn't want to go because I knew that's where my depression, anxiety, and panic attacks came from. And so I locked myself in the room, and I remember the police showing up. I was in my room just listening to music, and the police were like, either you got to come with us, or you got to go with them, or you got to come with us. And me being the person that I was terrified of the police. I was like, hell no, you're not taking me, blah blah blah. So I went with the social workers. Social workers took me to another foster home. At that time, that's where I started running away from foster care because I was placed into another abusive home, to another abusive home, to another. And once I became a runaway or frequent runaway, they put me into a diagnostic center for runaways and problem children, I guess. Um, I was the kind of kid who would, like, I would try to commit suicide several times. And that's when they finally were like, yeah, she needs to be in, like, in a way where she can be, kept together, or whatever. So, or kept watch, I guess. I was never allowed to be alone. I remember being in these places and thinking, what the fuck am I doing here? But that never changed the mindset that I had because I knew as soon as I got out, I was back in the same situation again, where they won't listen to me. They won't, understand where I was coming from and why I didn't want to be in these places anymore. All this and the other. And I remember, one girl who was there, and with my depression, I was in the mode of like, I don't want to eat anything. I remember meeting this girl. Her name was Angel, and she was like the most like amazing person in the world. I loved her to death. Like she was like my best friend. Um, and I remember meeting her. She struggled with what is it called? With what the fuck? I have it too, but I don't remember. Well, I used to have it. Anorexia. And she had these pills, and I remember looking at her. I'm like, "You're so pretty," and she's like, "Thank you." And I told her, I was like, "I want to be skinny. Like, I don't feel like eating anymore." So she's the one who kind of got me into the state where that's where I wanted to be. I wanted to be anorexic. Um, so I stopped eating. I stopped doing anything, and I became like this, like obsessed. I became obsessed with trying to be skinny. I remember measuring my like wrist, my ankles, my arms, my like I would touch like my collarbone. I would touch my collarbone and kind of like feel around and see if I could feel my collarbone and all that. And if I couldn't feel it or see it, I would make myself throw up. I would take these diet pills. I remember um, we would take Xanax. We would do all kinds of stuff. But I stopped doing Xanax because I was just like, okay, you know what, I'm not doing this. This makes me feel weird. So I never really took anything after that. I maybe did it like once, and after that, I was like, nope, drugs ain't for me. So, um, I remember doing that, and I just became obsessed with having to be really skinny. I remember being so skinny to the point I nearly died. Um, so they put me into another home after I got out. I went back into another one. This was called Arrow Diagnostic or Arrow Family and Children or Children and Family like Diagnostic Center. Um, and I remember being in there, and I remember all the fights that used to happen in there. I was like the kind of kid, like I stayed to myself. I didn't really talk to anybody. I didn't talk, involve myself with anyone. And um, I remember one guy who was there, and something that like threw me off with him was he looked so much older than everyone else. And come to find out, he always had like some bandages on his arm, and I didn't know why. Until one day I decided, I'm gonna walk up to him and talk to him. I went to talk to him, and come to find out, he was a cutter, and he like had these cuts that didn't go side to side; it went up and down. So it was a way that he would, like, people, it would be harder for them to stitch. And I remember him telling me, he's like, "You want to run away together? You want to get out of here?" And I was just like, "Well, not really." I was like, "I'm here to mainly try to get some help with my anorexia and my depression." And he's like, "If you don't run away with me, I'll just kill myself." And I told him, I'm like, "You shouldn't kill yourself just because I won't run away with you." He's like, "Well, would you go out with me?" Like, no. I'm like, "There's a reason why you're here too. I'm not dating a guy who has issues too." So I told him no, and it was just all kinds of bad. So I remember I ended up leaving there into a group picture, and then that same day we were walking together, and I told him we're gonna go stay with my sister, and he said okay. So I stayed with my sister, and then push come to shove, um, I became a runaway again, and they had like pictures of me, and they were all trying to find me, and they never found me. I remember being in like a McDonald's with one of my friends, and we would just sit there, and he was like, the police officer came over, and um, he pulled us aside, and he was like, "Well, we're looking for some runaways," and I was like, "Oh shit, they found me." Um, but they didn't. They didn't think anything of it because I looked nothing like the picture that they gave him. So I was just like, okay. And so after that, me and her immediately like got up and left because he was. I felt like he was gonna know that those were the runaways. That girl was the runaway. So we left and we went to a laundry room. After that, like minutes later, we hear like sirens going off, and like we hid. We were just like, oh shit, like it can't be seen. And we see the police officers like just drive past. Um, and then finally, I came of age where I can decide if I wanted to be in foster care or not, and I chose not to. I remember that's where my life kind of went off hill because I stopped going to school because I knew that they would catch me or take me in to foster care again. So I remember um, I tried taking my life again, and I was sent to the hospital. This time I was back with my mom again, and I remember my mom. I remember my mom like taking me. I mean, I'm taking parts out of the story because I don't. This part I'm still not prepared for people to hear. I remember my mom telling me once we got back to the house, she's like, I don't want you living here anymore. She kicked me out, and I was maybe around like 16, 17 years old. Um, so I left, and then went to live with friends, and I went back to living with my mom, and it was like an on and off thing with my mom, just having her, not having her, having her, not having her, and it was just terrible. Give me a second. I gotta use the bathroom because I can't think anymore. Okay, I'm getting like extreme, like, ugh. Um, yeah, I remember it being on and off with my mom, not living with her for a bit. Um, so I started writing music. Um, I remember going to PA, and I lived with my mom or my grandmother and my cousin there. Um, I remember finally getting a good job, and I started working at Apple, and I loved it. I loved working there. I worked in a warehouse fixing phones and all that stuff. I remember doing that. Oh my god, it was the best. And then I remember finally, one day, I was just like, okay, you know what? My great grandmother ended up passing away. I only met her once, and I remember her having a tattoo, so I decided to get the same tattoo with her favorite colors in it. And I just turned 18. I was so happy to get my first tattoo, and I finally got it. And I just thought to myself, I'm like, I'm gonna use this as like a way of coping, because I thought, me getting tattoos was me getting that tattoo was more of like a way of me coping because I finally got the tattoo and I was so much more happier. I was like felt like I was in the best place ever. And I had like the job that I've always wanted, like a job that I felt like I was comfortable with and I loved it. Um but then I remember my cousin took me and him back to Maryland cuz he said he was going to visit his girlfriend. We went to the mall and I remember him paying for like some weird game for me to play on, and I was just like, okay. And in the middle of playing the game, I stopped playing, and I remember getting up and I went to go see my sister because she worked in the mall, and she was like, Carlos left. He went to go see his girlfriend. I was like, oh, okay. So I didn't think anything of it, and I sat down and I chilled with my sister at her job, and um, that's when my sister finally told me. She's like, Carlos isn't coming back. I'm like, what do you mean? She was like, oh well, he's you're gonna come and live with me. I'm like, why? I was like, my stuff is there. He has my card. He has my wallet. What do you mean I'm coming to live with you? So I'm calling my grandmother. She's not answering. I'm calling my cousin. He's not answering. I'll call my grandmother again, and she's like, I don't know what's going on. I'll tell Carlos to come pick you up. And finally, she answers after like a good long while, and I talk to her, and she's like, Carlos is here. And I'm like, well, why is he there? He's supposed to come pick me up. I have work tomorrow. So I remember getting so angry with my grandmother because she listens to him, and he didn't want me to be there anymore because I don't know why. Even though I helped around with bills, I've helped around with all kinds of stuff, and I've done so much for my grandmother and all that, and they just immediately just threw me out like I was nothing. And I remember being in a state of like pissed off and annoyed and irritated and upset because I finally felt like my life was coming together. I felt like my life was going to be better if I stayed there, but it wasn't. I moved back to Maryland and I stayed with my sister. And I stayed with her for a while, and then finally I left there to live with my aunt and uncle from when I was younger, who also lived in Silver Spring. So I stayed there with them. My rent was $500. I didn't really have a job, so I had to go find one. And I finally got a job, and I went from my uncle telling me, you're gonna pay 500, 100 for food, and another the 400 for rent. I told him I don't eat, so there's no point in me paying for food. So he dropped it down to 400. My aunt constantly bashed me and told me, "Oh, you're gonna have to pay this much. You're gonna have to pay that much." And I always told my uncle, I was like, "Well, I gotta pay to be able to get to and from work. I have to be able to pay for my own food. So 500 isn't enough for me to pay you guys if I don't have that kind of money." So he always, made a deal with me. He's like, don't worry about it. It's okay. I remember him offering to get me a car, and I told him, I was like, I can't do that. And I was like, I appreciate it, but maybe later on in life, once I have my driver's license. And he's like, okay. And I finally left there because my sister told me I can live with her for $250 a month. I said, okay, that's fine. That's a lot better for me either way. But then it started getting harder for me to be able to get to and from work. So I I remember my sister raising my rent over and over and over again, and it was bad. Fast forward, started talking to a guy. This guy is now my daughter's dad. We ended up living together. We lived in West Virginia for a while, Lewisburg, West Virginia, and that's when I found out I got pregnant with my daughter. And I was so happy. I was so excited for her to be here and all that and the other. Um, and I was still, grateful that she's in my life now because she's my reason to keep going. She's my reason to push forward and to not give up on life, even though I still feel like I want to give up, but I'm pushing for her. So, yeah. Um, Now in my life, me and him ended up breaking up because he kept cheating on me. He kept treating me like I wasn't nothing, and his family treated me like I was shit. Um, I started dating a different guy, maybe like a year, 2 years after me and him broke up, or a year after me and him broke up, and me and this guy dated for about 2 years, um, or almost 2 years. Of that, it would have been almost 2 years. His family didn't like me. I never understood why, but they didn't like me. They treated me like shit as well. So me and him broke up, and I moved, and that's where I'm at now. Is my new home. Um, And yes, I'm dating a new guy, and this guy's very sweet, very loving, very caring. Um, and I personally feel like I want to do better in my life, but I feel like there's so much stuff stopping me from doing better because I'm still dealing with my depression. I'm still dealing with my anxiety. I'm still dealing with so much issues that I'm going through now, and I just feel like shit. I don't feel like my mindset is in a good place. I still have those thoughts of wanting to commit suicide. I still have the thoughts of my life is never getting better. My life is it is what it is. And I don't feel as if anything's going to get better for me. But I feel as if I can do whatever I can to make my daughter's life better by giving her the support and the structure of a mom that I feel as if she deserves to have. I don't want to like do the same pattern of what my mom did or my dad or whatever. And I don't want her to go through what I had to go through growing up. And so I'm doing my best now, and I'm just trying to find where I belong, even though I feel like I'm still not where I'm at. I'm not. I always tell people I'm okay, I'm doing good, I'm doing great, I'm okay. In reality, I'm really not. I hide so much, and I try to keep everything a secret. I don't try to tell people about what's going on in my life. But yeah. Anyways, that's my story. But I'm gonna go ahead and get off. I'm gonna see this comments real quick.